If you, sirs, surveyed 100 Christians about their spiritual journey, an overwhelming majority would confess the same frustrating reality. Despite years of church attendance, Bible reading, and prayer, they feel spiritually stagnant. They possess knowledge about faith, yet lack the transformative power that Scripture promises. They can recite verses and theological concepts, but genuine spiritual growth remains elusive. This disconnect between religious activity and authentic spiritual development represents one of Christianity's most pervasive challenges, and the solution lies in understanding a fundamental principle that most believers have never been taught. The modern Christian experience often resembles a hamster wheel of religious routine. Believers attend weekly services, participate in Bible studies, volunteer for church activities, and maintain personal devotions, yet they remain essentially unchanged. They accumulate biblical information like students cramming for an examination, but this knowledge fails to penetrate the depths of their character. They pray regularly, but their prayers feel mechanical, lacking the intimacy and power described in Scripture. This pattern continues for years, sometimes decades, leaving sincere believers wondering why their faith feels so distant from the vibrant spiritual life promised in the New Testament. The missing element in most Christian spiritual development is not more information, more activities, or even more discipline. It is the practice of authentic spiritual surrender. True spiritual growth occurs not through human effort alone, but through the paradoxical act of yielding control to divine transformation. This surrender goes far beyond intellectual acknowledgement of God's sovereignty. It requires the deliberate, ongoing choice to release personal agendas, fears, and self-directed plans to allow God's Spirit to work unhindered in one's life. Most Christians approach their faith like a self-improvement program, attempting to modify their behavior through willpower and religious obligation. They read Scripture to gain knowledge, pray to fulfill duty, and attend church to maintain social connection or religious standing. While these activities have value, they become obstacles to growth when pursued as ends in themselves rather than means of drawing closer to God. The focus remains on human performance rather than divine transformation. Authentic surrender begins with honest self-examination. It requires believers to acknowledge their inability to produce genuine spiritual change through personal effort. This humility opens the door to dependence on God's Spirit, who Scripture identifies as the actual agent of transformation. When believers release their death grip on controlling outcomes and instead trust God's process, they create space for supernatural change that surpasses human capability. Practical surrender manifests in daily choices. It appears when facing difficult circumstances by asking what God desires to teach rather than immediately seeking escape routes. It emerges in relationships by choosing forgiveness over revenge, service over self-interest, and love over judgment. It develops through prayer that moves beyond requesting personal desires to seeking alignment with God's purposes. It grows through Bible reading that prioritizes transformation over information accumulation. The transformation that follows genuine surrender differs qualitatively from self-directed improvement. It produces character changes that surprise even the believer experiencing them. Patience develops in naturally impatient people. Generosity emerges in those previously characterized by selfishness. Peace pervades lives once dominated by anxiety. These changes occur not through gritted teeth and forced behavior modification, but through the gradual renewal of desires and motivations from within. Churches often inadvertently hinder this process by emphasizing external compliance over internal transformation. Programs, activities, and behavioral expectations can create an illusion of spiritual progress while actually preventing the deep work that occurs only in surrender. Well-meaning religious structures sometimes substitute busyness for authentic growth, leaving believers exhausted but unchanged. The path forward requires a fundamental shift in approach. Instead of asking what more they can do for God, believers must learn to ask what they can release to God. This surrender is not passive resignation, but active trust, not abandonment of responsibility, but recognition of dependence. It acknowledges that the Christian life is not about human achievement, but divine accomplishment through willing vessels. True spiritual growth awaits those courageous enough to release control and trust God's transformative power. This surrender, practiced consistently over time, unlocks the vibrant spiritual life that every sincere believer desires but few experience. The missing key is not hidden in complex theology or advanced spiritual disciplines. It rests in the simple, profound act of yielding completely to the one who promises to complete the good work he has begun.